Welcome. My name is Michael Alf. I'm the author and creator of the Virtual Summit Formula and host of the Discipline Disruption podcast. This is where I bring together one of the most brilliant minds and discuss with them how to thrive in today's fast-changing world. Have you ever heard the term failure is not an option? When you are in the corporate world and you have a corporate role, most likely you have heard that or something similar. Or you might have felt that feeling that actually failure is not really an option because when you fail, then it will have severe consequences. This might be no promotion, this might be actually losing your role, your job, or something else. But then there's also the saying around failure is an option or fail fast and fail forward. So what I'd like to talk in this video about is how this fits together in my view on the perspectives around failure. So when you are in the corporate world, most likely actually this applies, and the higher you move, the more difficult the term failure actually becomes. And I want to share kind of two little stories from my own personal life. One is running a large project management office, which we had around 50 to 60 projects. I had, kind of 24 project managers, business analysts, change managers, testers, and all that what you need to run projects professionally. So in that circumstances, when talking to my boss and other stakeholders, obviously the expectation was, well, we pay you a lot of money, so we expect that those projects are delivered, and all of them. So this is failure is not an option. And I remember that kind of this feeling that, yes, okay, I get that. And at the same time, I know, as a matter of fact, that about 30% of all projects are failing. Where do I know that from? Well, this is the second part of the story. Back when I was doing my executive MBA, I was writing a thesis around to how to apply real options in the logistics world. They're very theoretical concept. I know, and I don't deep dive here into that one. But what we did, we interviewed a number of experts, executives, a lot of CIOs, but also business executives around projects and project failure. And interestingly, one of the questions was around, so from your experience, how many of the projects are typically failing? And to my big surprise, one of the CIO actually said, in all honesty and seriously, 100% of the projects. What he meant by that is basically that every single project has a delay, is typically late, has an overrun in the budget, or has a smaller scope than originally planned for. So this is kind of 100% failure. But kind of in all, when we all put together, then actually the average was around 30% of projects are failing. So and there's a lot of studies around that, when you deep dive into that, it all comes back to the kind of roughly that amount. So if that's true, imagine, you go into a role and 30% in average are failing. And you go in there, or you have the expectation put on you that you go in there with a 100% success rate because you're paid so well and you have so much experience. Then there's a conflict between reality and the expectation. And this is kind of a reflection of how I see that working a lot in the corporate world. It's kind of this final statement, so, well, you're paid so well, so you have to deliver. And if you don't deliver, we find somebody else who is delivering. And then now, more and more on the other side, there's another trend and another development, which you probably have heard and seen and maybe experienced some of that. Partially it's revolving around the Agile Scrum, the Agile Scrum methodology. By the way, one of the guests on my podcast is Jeff Sutherland, the founder of and father of Scrum. So tune into that one. It's really a great interview. But that's just as a side. So one of the principles there is actually being very flexible and quickly test out what works and what doesn't work. So kind of it boils down to the so-called concept fail fast and fail forward. So this implies and encourages actually a failure. And some of the large organizations actually implement this concept into their habits, into their culture. But I find it extremely difficult because it's a massive cultural shift. So with that kind of those two sides, more the entrepreneurial agile world and more the classical corporate world, I think that's one of the areas, one of the major areas where they clash, and that's why I wanted to put this video up as one of the first ones here on the channel. So you can actually enjoy that. I would like to kind of leave you with 3, I'd say, lessons or challenges when you go back to work. One is think about an area where you can plan to fail. Kind of because you can sit down and say, this is an area I can test and try something out, and I can see what is failure, what is not failure, and then I can reflect what I learned out of it. So think about one area and test it out. The second one is, I suggest you create a situation or an environment for you and your team where you can test things out. So that's not a purposeful failure, but it's actually an environment which allows for things not going right. So you create that environment especially for your team. So it's less kind of yourself, but actually for your team. And the third question or challenge I would pose before kind of I finish that video is where's an area where you behave like failure is not an option. Reflect back on your day-to-day work and think about that's an area actually where I behave as if failure is not an option. And then I would like to kind of ask yourself, what if I failed? How does failure look like? But actually, what is the consequence? What's the worst case scenario? And what is the kind of a better case scenario? And what could I put in place today to reduce that risk of failure or the impact of the failure? Just by reflecting some of the situations might be extremely interesting just to get a different perspective for your work and how you approach certain situations. I hope you enjoyed that video. It's actually, this one is the first one, so there's still things to be done better. I look forward to your feedback, and please head to my website, michaelalf.com. You can download actually a copy of the Virtual Summit Formula, which gives you kind of an interesting insights how to build how to build your business online and use virtual summits for that. And obviously tune into the podcast, michaelalf.com/podcast. I wish you a wonderful day and see you next time. Thank you.